So, Speak No Evil is the American remake of the Danish film of the same name. The Danish film was directed by Christian Dartrup, and this new remake, is directed by James Watkins, who previously directed films like The Woman in Black. Now, the original Danish film, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely see it. It's definitely a horror film that stuck with me for the longest time, because it was a film all about this family who unwittingly accepts invitations from this other family that they meet on vacation, who are fairly kind. They're inviting, they're good for conversations, and they seem like very interesting and intriguing people. So they meet them on vacation, and they're like, they're lured over to their country home to kind of like, just relax with them, for a little bit of more of a vacation, and so the families can get to know each other. But of course, as their trip goes on, like, there's something else lurking under the surface, and they quickly learn that this family is actually pretty abusive and have a very, very dark secret that they hide that turns very, very brutal and at least to a very unsettling ending for this family's trip to visiting another family. Now, what I loved so much about the Danish film is that it proceeds along in a manner where, in like a fairly subtle manner. Like, there are little clues here and there that like this inviting family is not what they seem, but they're kind of like they're a little bit, they're a little bit more nuanced. Like, you have to kind of like closely pay attention. Like at one point, like the mother is a vegetarian. He tries to like force her to eat some meat, but in a way he's just kind of like, oh, come on, just try a little, little. And there's like, and of course, because she doesn't want to be rude, she's like, okay, I guess I will. And of course, as that keeps going on, it keeps snowballing until it gets to like this very gruesome point. But as it keeps going, I think it plays more into like this this more primal aspect of humanity in how like in how this like family basically like guts and tries to steal the life of another family, while also kind of like taking like some creepy aspects of like of leaning into like the sex of this couple, and how like their lives are a little bit more complicated, and how they're a little bit too docile about what happens in their lives. So there's a lot going on in the Danish version of Speak No Evil, but in the American version, it feels like it's on steroids. It feels like it's I know this is a little bit of like a stereotype, but like it feels like it's dumbing down the original like for an American audience. And I think just because like they play up everything, like there's familiar scenes that happen within this American version, like almost like beat for beat, but they're played up to like such a high level where they feel like a little bit too intense, while at the same time not exploring enough. So like the unfortunate family who gets lured in is played by so like there's the mother, Louise, played by Mackenzie Davis, who she's vegetarian, she's frustrated, she's had an affair. You have Ben, played by Scoot McNairy, who tries to be a loving father, but he finds himself frustrated with trying to like assert his masculinity, isn't sure that he can pull it off, so he's very insecure. And they have a daughter called Agnes. Now the family that lures them in here, they're extreme. Like, they're not just like nice like in the Danish version. They're like like you can clearly tell like they're on like something. So like the family is composed of Patty, played by James McAvoy, who has just dialed up his acting to 11 here, and I think that's probably the most likable thing about the film, is just McAvoy goes full on crazy in this role. Like, he has like this grin that will never leave, and these just like these like always open eyes that are just like freaky, the way that he has such exuberance. His wife Clara, played by Iceline Francoisi, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, more or less just goes with the flow. Like, she's also shares a little bit of that same energy. And the one aspect that kind of throws them off, that should be like the first big clue, is like their son, Ant, who can't speak because he has a small tongue, which makes it hard for him to talk. So Ant can't say a lot. And of course, you can sense like what's happening. You're like, okay, Ant clearly has something that he's trying to tell this family, but they won't listen. Something sinister is going on here. So it's very much the same story that happens within the Danish version, like complete with all like the same beats of like, Patty trying to like, offer up some meat. There's another awkward scene where like the kids are dancing and Patty gets like viciously drunk and angry. That scene is dialed up even higher, so it's even more intense and uncomfortable. And another scene I thought kind of like set the tone for this film about how it was kind of going to be. It wasn't. I knew it wasn't going to go that far. Is the scene where Patty and Clara invite Luis and Ben out for dinner, and while they're out to dinner, Patty and Clara get like very sexual, but not like sexual enough. Like they get very into dancing, and like they try to like simulate a blowjob under the table at one point, but then they always have like this gotcha moments, like like we're kidding, we're not really doing this in front of you, we're not that weird. The problem with this film though is there are so many of those fake outs with this couple. Like at one point, like after they come out here and like Louisa's cut her hand and she realizes that Patty's a doctor. It's like, Patty, you're a doctor. Can you look at my hand? It's like, oh, I'm not a doctor. I don't know where you got the idea I'm a doctor. It's like, what, really? It's like, oh, I'm kidding. And there are other moments like that where it's like, oh, should we do this? Oh, I'm kidding. It's like, oh, maybe we'll force you here. Maybe we'll kill you. Just kidding. It's like, and it gets to such a degree where you're just kind of like, would you just start stabbing the family already? Would you just do? I'm getting tired of like about 2/3 of the way through. I'm getting tired of all like the fake outs here. And I think probably like the biggest insult I think to like adapting the Danish version is that this film completely changes the ending. I don't mean like they just changed a few things here and there, like up to like the point where like the revelation is made about what like Patty and Clara are actually doing. It's mostly a faithful adaptation for replicating a lot of the same scenes and a lot of the same dialogue. But once it gets to that moment of revelation, it feels like the film just turns into a completely different movie. It goes from being like a psychological horror thriller to just an action horror film. Because then after that, it turns into like a running through the house, terrified, trying to, fight for your life type of action horror film in which Patty and Clara have to be defeated in like the most brutal way possible, and the son gets revenge on the his supposed parents in this scenario, and it feels like it changes gears completely, where it's trying to be an audience pleaser. And to the film's credit, I think it does that decently enough, because at least like the audience that I saw with it, they were getting really into it. They were excited. They're like, oh, don't go in there. It's one of those, how do I put it? It's one of those don't go in there, scream back at the screen movies where like horror characters are like running and they're like, you're saying, oh, don't go this way, don't go that way, and then when they finally assault the killer, you're just kind of like, yes, they killed the killer, they did it, they're like happy, and it's like, is this really the remake of Speak No Evil, in which like it ends on a very dark note? Like I'll reveal a little bit of a spoiler here just so people know where I'm coming from here, but in the original Danish version, the family don't make it out alive. Like the whole bit is that the corrupted family who try to like lead other families out to their house, they basically want to kill off the family and then keep the child and cut off their tongue so that they can't tell anybody that they've, stolen this child that they've tried to make their own. And that actually happens at the end of the Danish version. But in this American version, the kid who got his tongue cut out gets to smash in the parents' heads with a cinder block. And it's just like, there's nothing left to like contemplate at that moment. You're just watching, this entirely different type of film of, these victims fleeing from their killers, like it's a straight up slasher movie at times. And I know that, I know that for like an American audience who hasn't seen the Danish version, they're probably going to come into this film and they're probably going to leave it, enjoying it as like a kind of, running away from like the killer type of slasher film. But it's so hard for me not to think of the Danish version, which had so much to say, and it also felt like it had more guts with wanting to tackle just like the darker ending, and how it wasn't afraid to lean into more aspects of the feuding couple's like sex life, and how it takes like a very strange and uncomfortable turn here. They completely avoid that in this film. It feels like this film is trying to avoid too much of the psychological darkness, and even like some of like the psychosexual angles that are present here. And I think like just removing those key elements, it might still be a fine film for a lot of people, but it just feels like such a watered down and reduced version of a horror film that felt like it was saying a lot. And here, this version, Speak No Evil, is just saying like, hey, isn't James McAvoy a pretty eccentric killer? And it's like, yeah, he is, but like there's not a lot of meat to this film when compared to the Danish version, which, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, the original international version was better, but it really is. Like I could not stop thinking about that film when I first watched it, and it was just because it was so grisly, and it just like it leaves an impression that just haunts you days after. But after watching this version of Speak No Evil, all I could think about was just like, yeah, James McAvoy is a good killer, but I didn't really get a lot to contemplate out of that scenario. And I felt a little bit robbed too, because like up until that point, there was I could feel the film was like trying something, because like I noticed there was a distinct lack of music before it gets to like the more action oriented elements of the third act. There's a lack of music. It just like lets scenes unfold as they are, and I thought that was kind of interesting. But there's also some choppy editing that's going on here, where it feels like there were some scenes in between that they were just kind of like diced out really quickly, and we just like jumped to other scenes way too quickly, and just you kind of gotta like, it feels like it's stumbling around to like keep up with itself and keep it interesting while still hitting all the same scenes as the original. So it just feels like a mess at times. Like, it does have its moments. I do like McAvoy's performance. He does play off like Scoot McNairy pretty well. The kids are pretty good actors here. I think they have just the right amount of like concern and navigating their way through like intense moments. But it's just like, it's an entirely different tone from the original that I just couldn't shake. So I would say if you haven't seen the Danish version, you will probably like the American Speak No Evil. But after that, I would say go watch the Danish version, because like I got a lot more out of that film than I did from this picture, which just feels like a kind of more or less just like an action horror film that doesn't really have a lot to consider beyond just McAvoy's performance. So yeah, very good performances in a film that is just tonally and thematically not as engaging as the material that it's drawing from.